to discover if science and technology are beneficial or harmful. Apparatus, a man in a telecommunications satellite. Yo. A nano-cybernetic computer, aka Nancy. And 4,000 TV signals and telephone lines that I can patch into. Method, I talk to scientists and engineers and technocrats. Observations, they tell me science and technology are great. Conclusion, science and technology are great. Greek? What the? It's just a, come on, what the heck? Run the opening, Nancy. What the? When the wood-headed duck mates, it mates for life. Usually with another wood-headed duck. But every once in a while, if a really cute... Now what was that, Nancy? Well, garbage off.
Rising anti-Semitism in Eastern Europe has voted English-only sign. 40,000 tons of armed with PCBs blew up the ozone layer today.
Standing by for solid rocket booster separation.
Speaking to you here is Space Cadet Roger, and we're just so happy to see you over here in Japan.
Hello, Commander Rick.
Hello, hey.
Hello.
Commander Rick.
Commander Rick.
Greetings, prisoners of gravity. This is Commander Rick. You know, I've been watching the 4,000 channels that go through this satellite, and all but 2 of them have been advertising that Nintendo Power Glove. But up here in space, it's always a million shopping days till Christmas because Santa's sleigh is strictly suborbital. So instead, I've made my own. The power to be my best. You know, while I was working on this thing, I was watching that all-news channel, and it amazes me how many of the problems of the world today have to do with science and technology. Dome stadiums, AIDS, toxic waste, nuclear power, test tube babies, acid rain. I mean, 50 years ago, that was all science fiction, and now it's the stuff of life. Who would have thought? Well, science fiction, that's who. Of course, science fiction also thought of time travel, shrinking humans, anti-gravity, and Martians, so, you know.
The distance between the Earth and the Moon at its closest proximity is 238,000 miles. We expect to cover this distance in approximately 48 hours.
25,000.
Clear the jettison tail section. You ready?
Oh, there you are, sorry. The father of modern science fiction was Hugo Gernsback. In 1926, he published a magazine called Amazing Stories. It was the first magazine exclusively devoted to science fiction, and it was a hit. In a few years, Hugo had a whole slew of magazines just like it. Hugo was fascinated with radio and electricity and saw these magazines as a way to get kids interested in science.
Science fiction, it's hard to define, but obviously it's fiction which has a basis of science in it, so that's goes without saying.
Certainly Robert Runte, who's a Canadian SF historian, has said that the classic science fiction story is an engineer, male of course, lands on a planet and makes it safe for humanity, which includes occasionally women.
The fiction is the operative word. We're storytellers. The story has to keep moving. This is not, I don't think Hugo Gernsback's theories were correct, and you know, Gernsback theorized that science fiction was basically a way of sugarcoating science so we could raise up generations of scientists. I reject that. It's the story that takes primacy. But on the other hand, you should not make any egregious scientific errors if you can help it. And you should basically know what you're talking about.
In the late 1930s, a man named John Campbell became the editor of Astounding Stories magazine. Campbell had a degree in physics, and he felt the only thing missing from science fiction was good science and decent fiction. So he upped the standards for both, and in the process discovered Isaac Asimov, Robert Heinlein, Lester Del Rey, Clifford Simak, Theodore Sturgeon, a who's who of who was. Campbell gave writers advice, encouragement, and when that wasn't enough, he gave them the whole idea for a story. Campbell's golden age of science fiction set the style and the tone for the next 20 years. White male engineers imagineering the technological marvels of the future. Then, in the early 60s, came the new wave out of England. Young, exciting writers who were more interested in character than in gadgetry. The new wave was not all white. They were very seldom engineers, and they certainly weren't all male.
A younger group of writers who was not interested merely in exploring ideas about technology and in having these human puppets in the stories who would act out a technological fantasy. Instead, they became interested in who the people were. Who was it who lived in this technological world, and what did it do to them? How did it change their culture? How did it change their attitudes? And that advanced science fiction beyond a kind of puppet theater of technological ideas into the realm of human life.
The new wave made a big splash. Suddenly authors were being classified. Either you wrote hard SF or soft SF, the difference being the kind of science in the story and how much there was. Which brings us to the big question: how much science should there be in science fiction?
There should be a basic undertone of scientific literacy, but I don't think there should be great gollops of science.
To my mind, science fiction should contain just enough science to sell it to a science fiction magazine or to a science fiction editor. Or reader.
That sounds about right. Which brings us to the big question: how much science should there be in science fiction?
There should be as much science as is necessary to support your story. If you're going to write hard SF, then you need to do your research.
What the heck? Oh, okay, so there should be enough science to...
There should be just as much science in science fiction as the writer wants to put into it.
Oh, my thumb! My thumb's shorting out with my pinky!
There's science fiction, alternate histories that doesn't involve any science, really. That just involves doing your research in history or whatever else. You should research anything you're going to write.
I'd rather write stories about people, but what science fiction is all about is about writing on how technology impacts people, not the technical details of the construction of the shoes, but where will they pinch when placed on the feet. That seems to me to be the greatest source of pain in this century, in our lifetime, is the impact of technology on human beings and vice versa. And that's why I'm writing science fiction, really, to talk about the main issue at hand, surviving all this machinery.
For a story about surviving machinery, we should talk to Dr. Gregory Benford, or me. Benford's novel Great Sky River involves a race of giant machines called the mechs who view humans as a minor household pest. Benford's a scientist, a hard science fiction writer, and yet Great Sky River is almost an anti-technology piece. Greg, how do you feel about science and technology?
The stuff I write...
Where's the picture, Nancy? That's not Gregory Benford.
I have a very good science background, but I don't intrude it very much into the stories because I think it... I don't think it advances when people read stories. In the whole, I don't think they're interested in gadgetry or the way these equations work out. I think they're more interested in the way human beings interact under peculiar circumstances.
I'm a great admirer of Jack Vance, and he's right, of course, unless what's going on involves a gadget. Now, this can happen. Consider slow glass, invented by, I'll have it in a second, Bob Shaw. The Light of Other Days was his first slow glass story, and it was a scorcher. It twisted you hard. But it was based entirely on a gadget and its effect on human lives. The idea of light, of glass that takes 8 hours to let a beam of light through it.
Oh, okay, never mind, Gregory Benford. Larry Niven, you're a hard science fiction writer. In Lucifer's Hammer, you and Jerry Purnell wrote about a giant comet colliding with the Earth and how the survivors were saved partly by a nuclear power plant. How do you feel about nuclear power naysayers, Larry?
To my mind, most people who deal with nuclear power and so forth don't educate themselves enough about it to see that every technical question is in fact two-sided. It says, Okay, you don't want to use nuclear power. What are you going to use? Well, you use conservation. But you can't conserve 100%.